Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really interesting question, one that gets thrown around a bit. Is there such a thing as a specific Lebanon gene? Like one marker?
Hmm.
Well, the short answer, maybe unsurprisingly, is no, but the real story,
Hmm.
oh, it's much, much richer than that.
It really is.
So our mission today is to dive into all these sources you shared. We've got some amazing ancient DNA stuff, the whole buzz around Phoenician genes, how mountains versus coasts shape communities, and even how this history shows up in like modern health clinics. We're
Exactly.
aiming to piece together this unique genetic tapestry of Lebanon.
Yeah, and tapestry, or maybe stack is the right word, there's no single gene, but what's unique is this layering of influences over millennia. You've got these incredibly deep local Levant roots,
Right.
then later migrations adding to the mix, the impact of sea trade, huge for the region, obviously, plus the flip side, mountain isolation, and even specific social rules, about Mara.
So it's complex.
Deeply. The genome itself, it almost reads like Beirut, You have the really old stones, the ancient DNA foundations, then newer facades from later arrivals, and these sort of unexpected connections or separations, like streets crossing where you don't expect, showing how gene lines mixed or stayed apart.
Okay, let's go way back then, like deep history. Picture a Canaanite port,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Sidon. Bustling, cedar wood, that famous purple dye, maybe 4,000 years ago.
Yeah, around 3,700 to 4,000 years back, Bronze Age.
And I understand scientists actually got DNA from people buried there, right? From that exact time.
They did, yes, groundbreaking stuff. They sequenced genomes from individuals buried in Sidon.
So what did that ancient DNA tell us compared to people in Lebanon today?
Well, this is the really astonishing part. They compared it and found that a huge portion, something like 90% of the ancestry of Lebanese people today, traces directly back to those Bronze Age Canaanites.
90%. Seriously.
90%. There's a smaller, later contribution, probably linked to migrations from the Eurasian steppe direction, but that core, 90%. That's direct continuity from the Bronze Age population represented in Sidon.
Wow. That's incredible continuity.
Yeah.
Through all the empires that changes.
Exactly. Millennia of upheaval, trade, cultural shifts, conquests, and yet genetically, this foundational layer remained remarkably persistent.
That figure, 90%, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Does that kind of deep continuity change how we should talk about identity? More focus on these ancient roots rather than just recent history or ruptures. Or is it better to keep genetics out of those modern political identity discussions? I know researchers grapple with this.
They certainly do, and it's a really pertinent point. What's fascinating isn't just the number itself, but how it highlights the resilience, the persistence of a population core over such a vast timescale. It kind of challenges our view of the Levant as just a place of constant replacement. But linking ancient DNA directly to modern identity is always tricky, isn't it? There's culture, language, self-identification. Things genetics don't fully capture. So it shows deep roots, yes, but how that translates politically or culturally today, that's where the debate really lies. It forces us to be careful about what the genes show versus the narratives we build around them.
Okay, so we've got this amazing 90% Bronze Age anchor. Incredible. But let's shift gears a bit to something maybe more hyped up, something that definitely gets people talking online.
I think I know where you're going.
The Phoenician genes. You see those headlines, right? Phoenician DNA found. What's the actual science behind that idea?
Right, yeah, that one gets a lot of airtime. It largely stems from a well-known study focusing on the Y chromosome.
Okay, the male line.
Exactly. It passed from father to son almost unchanged. So this study looked for specific Y chromosome markers or lineages across the Mediterranean and argued that some of them seem to spread out from the Levant, potentially mirroring the trade routes of the ancient Phoenicians.
It's a cool idea. Connects to a big historical narrative.
It's definitely a cool idea, and it really captures the imagination. It keeps the comment sections very lively, as you said.
But I'm guessing there's some big caveats.
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, many geneticists urge a lot of caution here. The main warning is against sort of stamping a whole people onto a single genetic marker. The Y chromosome is just one single thread. Our full genome with maternal lines and all the other ancestry gives a much, much richer, more complex picture. Plus, people move. Later migrations often follow the same old routes.
So a marker found along a trade route might not only be from the Phoenicians.
Precisely. It could reflect later movements along those same pathways. So while some lines might echo Phoenician expansion, attributing it solely to them based on one marker is a leap. This leads to what you could call a good faith controversy. Is it useful branding? Maybe. Good for heritage tourism, tapping into that powerful Phoenician story? Or does it become, shaky science if you push it too far and try to pin modern identities onto these single ancient markers? It really pushes you, the listener, to think about the complexity behind those headlines.
Heritage versus hype.
Hmm.
Got it. Okay, so moving beyond just ancient lineage debates, how does the actual landscape, the geography of Lebanon, and maybe its culture influence the genetics within the country? Because it's known for its diverse communities, right? They didn't all just blend together uniformly.
No, definitely not. And this is where genome-wide studies looking at the whole genetic picture become really revealing. They show how both the physical geography and cultural practices have sort of sculpted the gene flow over centuries.
Sculpted, I like that. How so?
Well, we see evidence that some communities, for instance, parts of the Christian and Druze communities historically, became more genetically distinct, more isolated over time. This often seems linked to a combination of factors, maybe living in more mountainous, isolated regions, and also cultural practices like endogamy, the tradition of marrying primarily within the community.
Right, so geography and social rules working together.
Exactly. And you contrast that with, say, the coastal cities, the port towns. By their very nature, they were more like hubs, constantly open to new arrivals, traders, mixing, more open to traffic, genetically speaking.
So it's almost like mountains act like brakes on the marriage market, slowing things down, keeping gene pools more local.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
While the ports are like accelerators, speeding everything up,
Yeah.
bringing in new genetic lines constantly.
Precisely. And this cultural and geographical traffic control, as you called it, isn't just ancient history. It has shaped the patterns of genetic variation we see in Lebanon today. It helps explain how you can have that deep overall continuity we talked about earlier, alongside really distinct local genetic differences between communities.
So this raises an important question then. How can such long-standing patterns create so much diversity within a pretty small country?
It's because those societal rules, the marriage patterns, combined with landscape features like mountain ranges, can effectively create these genetic pockets of commonality reflecting generations of marrying mostly within that group or region, limiting the gene flow from outside, even while the wider region was a crossroads. It's a fascinating interplay.
It really shows how culture and environment literally get written into our genes over time. Okay, but let's bring this right up to the present day. Because this history, these patterns, they aren't just abstract concepts, they have real-world consequences, right? Especially for health.
Absolutely. This is where population history walks directly into the modern clinic.
Let's talk about specifics. I understand thalassemia is something relevant here.
Yes, beta thalassemia. Lebanon is situated right in the middle of the Mediterranean belt, where hemoglobin disorders, these are conditions affecting red blood cells and oxygen transport, are more common than in other parts of the world.
Okay. And how common is it in Lebanon?
National estimates suggest the carrier rate for thalassemia is around 2 to 3%.
2 to 3%. That might not sound huge to everyone.
It might not, but think about it. If 2–3% of people are carriers, the chance of two carriers meeting and having a child is significant. And if they do, there's a 1 in 4 chance with each pregnancy that the child inherits the gene variant from both parents and develops severe thalassemia major, a serious lifelong condition.
Right, so screening becomes really important.
Crucial. Screening and genetic counseling are key tools. They allow families to understand their risks, make informed decisions, and access appropriate care, importantly, without stigmatizing being a carrier. It's about knowledge and choice.
Okay, another one mentioned the sources. G6PD deficiency. What's that?
G6PD deficiency, that stands for glucose-6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. It's another enzyme issue, also quite common in regions with a history of malaria, actually. The trait seems to offer some protection against malaria.
Interesting. And the prevalence in Lebanon?
Well, one study, a newborn screening program in North Lebanon, found about 2.1% of babies screened had G6PD deficiency.
Okay.
And because the gene is on the X chromosome, it's X-linked, it affects boys more often. In that study, it was about 3.1% of boys versus just under 1% of girls.
Why is knowing about this deficiency so important?
Because certain triggers some infections. Eating fava beans is the classic example. Or taking certain medications can cause a rapid and dangerous breakdown of red blood cells, leading to severe anemia. So knowing a child has it from birth is vital for managing their health and avoiding those triggers. Early knowledge is key.
And connecting back to what you said about cultural patterns and those genetic pockets, marriage patterns, specifically consanguinity, also play a role in health, right?
Yes, absolutely. This links directly back to those long-standing community structures and marriage traditions we discussed. Consanguinity just means marriage between relatives, second cousins, or closer.
Okay.
And when relatives marry, there's a higher chance they both carry the same rare recessive gene variant inherited from a common ancestor.
So if they both carry it.
Then their children have a significantly increased risk again, usually a 1 in 4 chance of inheriting 2 copies and developing the associated recessive genetic disorder.
And how common are consanguineous marriages in Lebanon, according to the sources?
Surveys have reported varying rates, but generally somewhere in the range of 1/4 to 1/3 of marriages being consanguineous. First cousin marriage is typically the most frequent type within that category.
Wow, according to the third is quite high. Are those rates changing?
It seems to be a mixed picture. On one hand, factors like urbanization and increased mobility might be pushing rates down as people have wider social circles. But on the other hand, economic stress or instability can sometimes reinforce reliance on traditional family networks, which might keep rates relatively stable or even increase them in some contexts. It's complex.
So what's really fascinating here, connecting it all, is how these specific health conditions, thalassemia, G6PD, the impact of consanguinity, directly mirror that whole genetic story. The ancient mixing that perhaps spread some of these variants around the Mediterranean, combined with later periods of isolation or specific marriage patterns that concentrated them in certain communities.
Exactly. They're like living echoes of that deep population history.
And this brings up a really important point for you, our listener, to think about. Where do you find the right balance between respecting long-held cultural traditions, family structures, and the public health goal of preventing or managing recessive genetic diseases? Should the main focus be on things like voluntary screening, education, informed choice for individuals and couples? Or do these prevalence numbers suggest maybe a need for more robust public health policies or interventions?
It's a really difficult societal discussion with strong arguments on all sides. There's no easy answer, and it's something communities and health systems grapple with globally, not just in Lebanon.
Okay, so let's try and weave this all together. We've covered ancient roots, debated lineages, geography, culture, health. If we put it on a timeline, what's the concise story these layers tell us about Lebanon's genetic makeup?
Okay, let's try a quick summary, thinking in layers. First, that Neolithic and Bronze Age foundation. You have local Levant farmers mixing with groups moving in from the east, like the Zagros Caucasus area. This blend forms the people we call Canaanites, archaeologically.
Right, the Sidon findings.
Exactly, that's the bedrock, the dominant layer. Then, layer 2, Iron Age through Roman times. More mixing happens, trade ramps up. Empires come and go, the sea lanes are busy. This has more genetic threads, but crucially, it doesn't wipe out that Canaanite foundation. The small bit of step-related ancestry probably filters in during this long period.
Still building on the Beirut.
Still building. Then layer 3, medieval to modern times. This is where culture and the landscape really fine-tune things locally. You get those pockets of genetic isolation developing, maybe in the mountains or within specific religious groups practicing endogamy. And these exist right alongside the coastal cities, which remain cosmopolitan melting pots. So it's this constant interplay. Deep roots plus ongoing mixing plus periods or pockets of isolation. That's what creates the pattern we see today.
It's not just one thing after another, it's everything interacting.
Exactly. It's dynamic. Not a simple replacement story, but layers and interactions over a very long time. That's what makes the Lebanese genetic story so compelling, I think.
So to wrap it all up.
Yeah.
No single Lebanon gene, definitely not. Instead, what we have is this incredibly rich, complex, and frankly, fascinating Lebanese genetic story. It's a story of profound Canaanite continuity stretching back millennia. It's shaped by seaborne connections, by mountain barriers acting as bottlenecks, by cultural choices, and it echoes today in very real health consideration.
Well said.
And it's really important to stress, again, this whole deep dive, it's not about finding some kind of genetic purity or ranking populations. Not at all. It's about understanding the intricate dance between place, time, migration, and culture in shaping the human genetic landscape everywhere.
Precisely. And maybe it leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on. If so much of the ancestry traces back to the Bronze Age, does that make modern Lebanese somehow more ancient than other populations? Or does it simply remind us that most populations, if you look deep enough, carry very ancient local roots mixed with later layers from elsewhere? What does ancient even really mean when we talk about human genetics, given our shared deep African origins?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is, and it underlines how this genetic story, stretching back thousands of years, still resonates today, whether you're exploring your family history or sitting in a doctor's office discussing a health screening. It all connects.